Hello. So today we're going to carry on from where we were last week. Last week we made black backgrounds in Procreate. Today we're going to start a drawing and then we'll do a background. We'll do a background before we finish the drawing. Probably won't finish the drawing in this session, but we'll start it. So first of all, we're going to draw and then we're going to add a background and then we'll carry on adding colour to our portrait. So first of all, let me switch my screen so you can see my iPad screen. Right, so here's my iPad screen. Let me just turn that off for a moment. So, person we're going to draw is, I can't remember her name, Barbi. Person we're going to draw is Barbi. I've just remembered her name. And just the first thing we want to do is bring in a reference. So this is under the spanner, then it's under canvas, and then you want to click this button here, reference, and you get a little window. So she's already there in mine because I was looking at it earlier, but if I clear, we'll go back and import her again. So across the bottom, you want this middle button. That button shows you what you're drawing as you're drawing it, which can be helpful if, especially if you've got the, if you've got the canvas really enlarged, it's useful to have that button to see your whole canvas. But I use this one, image, and it asks me if I want to import an image. If you tap on that, it'll go to your photo library. For ease, I have an album here called DX, which has everything that I might be using today. So I try and remember to put things in there before we start so I know where they are. But you can just find the picture in your photos. So, and then you just tap on the picture that you want. So in this case, it's this one. And we have Barbi. You can make it bigger by basically just dragging this corner down, which is what I'm going to do. So, and then if you use 2 fingers to pinch on the photo, you can make it bigger in that space. And if you just hold this little piece here, you can move it around your screen with that. So I use my finger rather than my Apple Pencil because I find it's easier, but I just move it with my finger. And you can make it smaller as you need as we go along. You can zoom in, again, just pinching on the photo. So that's what we need to start with. And then I've got a canvas here. I just made a canvas. You can just actually, if I go back, let me go back and remind you how to make a canvas. It's the plus button here. And then you just choose what canvas I'm using. I've got one that's A4, which is, I think, about 8 by 12 in US sizes. But yeah, A4 if you're European. And if you just tap on that, it'll make a canvas for you. So I'm going to go back to the one I already made. The reason why I'm going back to this one is because before we started class, I was doing some measuring. If I turn it on, I was doing some measuring up her face so that I could get the distances right. So we'll do this again. I'm going to make this. So you don't need this. I'm going to make this, lower the opacity. So I've just opened up the layer and lowered the opacity so that my drawing is less dominant, I guess. And then I'm just going to choose a dark blue color. So what I was starting with, I basically am looking at the shape of her face, which is a kind of an oval shape. This doesn't have to be exactly the right shape of her face because we'll adjust as we draw. So the face is angled slightly, so she's not looking straight on camera. There's a slight angle. So I drew this line, sort of, oh, I've gone off there. I've kind of drawn a line down the middle, and that's to help me get the angle in the face. Because if you look at the face here, the line goes down her nose and through her mouth. So it's a kind of curve like that. So it just helps me line all the features up. And the same in the line for the eyes. So I was measuring earlier to figure out where the eyes were. And they're kind of on that line. So if you find it easier, you can use a grid to draw with. Which, shall I show you how to make a grid? Would that be helpful? Maybe it will. Let me go back. I know we've done some of these things before, but the more you do them, the easier it gets. So if you want to make a grid of her face, the first thing you would do is import the photo again. So just click photo and it will bring in the photo. And then what you need to do is tap over here, click on drawing guide. Oh, I've clicked on the wrong thing. That's not what I meant to click on. I clicked on reference rather than drawing guide. There's drawing guide. And then if you click on edit drawing guide, you can see that there's already a grid appears over her face. That grid's too small. So we make it bigger. So we just go here to grid size and you can just make it a lot bigger. I kind of like a grid. If I'm going to use a grid, I like one with fairly big squares like this one. I can make those lines thicker. Again, you make the lines thicker just by moving this so that they're more visible. You can also change the color of them. You just change the color by picking up here. So I don't know, would yellow be more visible? Red? No, I think probably black is the most visible. It depends on the picture. So it's worth trying different colors to see. So we then have a grid which goes over her face. And then if we click done, mine's changed from black to white for some reason. My grid, it doesn't matter. Now, if you take a screenshot of that picture, the reason you need to take a screenshot is if you just share the picture, the grid won't appear. It doesn't show you the grids when you finish drawing and you share the picture. So the easiest thing to do is simply screenshot it, which on an iPad is clicking the power and one of the volume buttons. I've turned it off instead. I always do the wrong button. So let me open it up again. So it's the power and the bottom volume button. Yeah. So then you can edit that. So you've just got a photo. Done. And save it to your photos. Then what you can do in here is delete that layer or turn that layer off and then open up the drawing guide again. And it's because it's white. You can't see it because it turned itself to white for some reason. But if I make it black, you've then got the grid. The reason we're doing this in the same canvas is because that grid will be exactly the same as the one on her face. So, and then you can just go back to canvas here, import the reference. Again, move over to image, click import image. And there we have the photo with the squares on her face. You can't see them very well because they're white, not black. They're not very visible, but I can see them. There are squares on her face. And then when you're drawing, you can use the grid here to figure out where all the features sit. So for example, this eye here is right there. It sits. It's not letting me do it now. Hold on. I'm going to delete the photo. So you can now draw the features where you can see them here. So I'm not going to use a grid mainly because it takes me too long. And wrong photo. It takes me too long, and I would just rather do it by hand, do it sort of without a grid, just do it by eyeballing it. So, but that is how to do it if you want to use a grid. And if I'm trying to get absolute accuracy in a portrait, then I will use a grid because it's the best way to get accuracy. So I measured, and this eye is bigger than this eye. So sorry, this eye is bigger than this eye, and that's because her face is at an angle. So if she was looking straight on, the eyes would be the same size, more or less. But because there's an angle, the eye that is closer to the camera is bigger. So I just did a little bit of measuring of the photo to figure out where to put them. And then the nose. So the eyes are usually about halfway down the head. They're not here because her face is angled backwards slightly. So it's a bit less than halfway down. The nose usually sits halfway down here. So the bottom of the nose. So I'm gonna go back. For some reason, I'm having problems with my pencil. It keeps flicking off and changing color. So the bottom of the nose is about halfway down that line. And then the center of the mouth is usually, again, halfway between here and here, more or less. So, and I've put a little mark there for the bottom of the mouth. So once I've done that, I can just draw my features because I kind of know where they are. I do have a line here as well, which I think was the line that I put in for where the eyebrows are. So it really helps. You can draw much quicker if you start just by measuring and just putting in some little marks so you know where you're going to draw. And then we can just start sketching out. So I'm going to make her eyes a bit bigger so I can see them better. And we'll do another drawing on top of this. So this one can be as messy as you want. You can do as many sketches on top of sketches as you need. Sometimes I can do it, and that's too big. Sometimes I can get everything down the first time. Other times I can't. Sometimes it takes me 3 or 4 sketches before I've got everything right. So on each sketch, I'm adjusting and correcting where I've got the features. So I'm just looking at her eye at the moment and trying to understand the lines. I'm not really thinking of it as an eye while I'm drawing. I'm just trying to understand the lines basically and the shapes that I'm looking at. So it can be always be quite useful to draw in this line here. Even if you take it out, you can see it here in her photo. Even if you take it out later, it helps because it helps you to judge this space here. And that's how you can get the nose quite accurate, just by looking at the sort of negative space there. And I can see that it needs to be a little bit higher. So then I'm going to come over and do the second eye, and then we'll come back to the rest of the nose. So every time you're drawing a line, you're kind of creating an anchor for your next line to kind of match things up. So we get an eyebrow there. I've drawn the pupils too small, but it doesn't matter at the moment. I'll just make them bigger later. So I kind of like to add in all these lines around the face just because they help in figuring out where everything else sits. So again, normally if her face was straight on, then either side of her nose would line up with the inside of her iris there. But because her face is at an angle, they don't. This side, if you look at the photo here, this side, if you go straight up, does line up kind of with her iris. So I'm just drawing myself a line there. I'm drawing myself a line here, just a pale one, so I can make sure that my nose isn't too big. And on this side, this side of her nose lines up with the inside of her eye. So that's because of the angle. So again, you can draw yourself a little line here, which tells you where the end of the nose is. So it doesn't look at all like her yet, but don't worry about that. Don't think about likeness while you're drawing. Just draw what you can see. Because if you start thinking about likeness, then you start changing things and not actually drawing them as they are. If you're just drawing what you see, then you're much more likely to get a likeness in the end. So we have the mouth here. I don't usually join up the ends of the mouth. No, I think that's her features. So, oh no, she doesn't have any eyebrows. So when we're looking at the eyebrows, again, I will always look at where they begin. So I'll try and line them up with something so I know where to begin them. So I think in this case, they line up more or less with this part of the nose here. So the eyebrow will begin there. We can't see the end of her eyebrow. So that's going to go behind her hair. People always look, or portraits always look very strange until you've got eyebrows and eyelashes. And eyelashes are the very last thing that I put in. So my portraits often look very strange until the very end. Don't worry about it. Trust your process. Trust that what you're doing is accurate, and don't worry too much about likeness or how strange your picture looks. So now we're going to add in the hair. So she has hair coming from here, and it comes down and it goes right the way down here across her face, kind of to there. See, I haven't drawn the edge of the sides of her face really yet because her hair is covering a lot of it. So I'm going to make the picture smaller so I can see it properly. I think I've gone out a bit wide there. Same on this side. So again, this covers this edge of her eyebrow, so I'm going to go a bit lower to there. Oh, I'm just checking where her neck sits. And then we have shoulders there. And I'm just coming back up here to have a look and see if I think that's reasonably accurate. And I do. I think that looks okay. So now I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to go to this layer. I don't know why it's on multiply. It doesn't need to be. It can be on normal. So ignore the M there. It doesn't matter. So I had it on about 44% opacity. I'm going to lower it even more. So, and I'm going to draw in my new layer. So I'm going to lock this layer because I have a habit of drawing on the layer that I didn't mean to. So if I lock it, I can't do that. So to lock it, you just swipe. You hold on to the layer, swipe it to the left, and that little menu appears. Unlock, lock, delete. So I don't want to unlock. I locked it. So now I'm going to go and draw in layer 2. And I was thinking that today, whenever I've been teaching portrait drawing, I usually use an acrylic brush, which has a lot of texture. And I thought today we'll use an airbrush, which doesn't have a lot of texture. It's very smooth, just to see how different it is using a brush that is very smooth. So I think in that case, so I've been drawing this just with a pencil. I think I probably need an inker. So I'm going to the inking set that came with Procreate and trying to decide which inker to use. Let's use the dry ink because that always creates a really nice line. I don't like these ones all have really, really smooth lines, and I don't like doing really smooth lines. So I like my lines to have a bit of fuzz around the edge. So the dry ink or the ink bleed are good inkers because they have fuzzy edges. And I'm going for a dark blue again. I'm just picking a blue up. If you don't have one in a palette, you can just click on the square at the bottom and that opens this up and you can just pick one from in there. Almost always draw in blue. Mainly because that's the color I use for hatching. Now that's going to be too dark. So I'm going to lower the opacity a bit here. Just go down to maybe 50%-ish and draw over. So this, I think, will probably be my final drawing. If I mess it up, I'll do another one on top. So every time when you've done a layer of drawing, you can look at your drawing and decide whether you're happy with that being your final sketch. If not, you can just do exactly what I just did. Make a layer on top, lower the opacity, and do another one on top. Each time you do it, you'll get more accurate because each time I do it, I'm looking at the photo correcting anything that I think is not quite right. And I'm looking at that eye now and thinking it's sloping downwards that way really badly. So it needs to not slope downwards. So I'm going to redraw it. So I'm just undoing what I've done and making it. That's because when let me show you, I can see now what I did wrong. When I did this drawing, I did a line across and I made it curved, but it's too curved. Her eyes actually on her face, they almost go that way. So I need to redraw them. So I'm going to just do her eyes in the layer above to try and get them right. And I'm going to go back to a pencil. So I'm going back to, oh, I've got a different set of pencils now. Which one was I using before? Drawing one, that's why. Take no notice of me. You can use anything. I have particular pencils that I really like to use. I'm a bit fussy. So I'm going to lower the opacity on this because I want this to be my underdrawing. So I think the eye is drawn fine, but it just is pointing down too much. So I just need to adjust it so that it's not pointing down so much. So I've just moved it up a tiny bit here. If you look here, actually I can make it bigger. That was the bottom of the eye before, and I've made it a little bit higher. And then this one I need to make a bit lower because this one is too high. So this is how you get accuracy, and this is how you get lightness. Not that I'm saying I'm necessarily going to get it today, but you get it by just really looking carefully. And if you see something, especially looking carefully at this kind of drawing stage, and if you see something that isn't quite right, change it. That eye is still too high. Or maybe it's not. No, maybe it's not. I think that's probably okay, actually. I'm going to do another layer. So just tap here to get another layer. And now I'm going to try and draw the whole thing with ink. So I'm going back to ink and I'm choosing that dry ink brush. Let me just lock these two layers so I don't draw on them. So I'm going to start again with those eyes. And what I might do, once I've got them drawn in, is just turn everything else off so I can have a look and see if I've got them right now. Yeah, that looks better to me right now. So I'm going to do this one as well, and then I'll show you how you can just have a look and see if it's right. And you can, at this stage, on an iPad, you can draw as many lines as you need to help you get accuracy, because you can delete them all afterwards. So if I now turn off the layers below, I can just look at the eyes. They look okay to me now. So I'm going to try and draw the rest of the face. So we're going to come in here to the nose. Then the mouth. Okay. Yeah, the eyes definitely look better now. So, but it will affect where actually the eyebrow still looks right. So I think I was drawing the eyebrow correctly, but just had the eyes at the wrong angle underneath. That one maybe should be a bit higher. So now they look uneven. So we'll just correct it. So I'm going to draw chin in first because I made it a bit too big in the under sketch. So I'm just making it a bit smaller. Yeah, that definitely looks better. And just figuring out where her neck sits before I add in the hair. So the hair, when we're doing this, obviously it helps if you can draw it reasonably accurately, but when we're adding colour, if we haven't got it on quite enough of the face, we can always change it when we're adding colour to make it fall over the face more. I often delete a lot of the lines that I draw in the hair at the end, so I don't worry too much about how they look. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the other two layers now and see how that looks. We need a line for the rest of the hair there. I think that looks fine. That's fine for a starting sketch. Again, the advantage of Procreate is you can work from this sketch, add your colour, and then at the end, you could decide that these dry ink lines, you don't like them. You can come back in and do another layer on top with a different pen, with a really smooth pen if you want a really smooth one. I'm just going to delete that line under her chin. But yeah, I think that's reasonable. So I'm going to delete those now. I have to unlock that one before I can delete it. I don't need them. You can keep them till the end and just turn them off. You don't have to delete them. So we're going to do a background. Now we've drawn the face. I really wanted the first thing. We're going to import backgrounds in several different ways. So if you want to be able to import a background and for it not to show through the face, if we're going to experiment with different color backgrounds, the easiest way of doing it is to paint the face white and put the background underneath. So I will show you how to do that. So we're going to use airbrushes today. So we can use the medium brush. So it's in the airbrushing set. It comes with Procreate there. When I first started drawing on Procreate, I only ever used, for about a year, the airbrushes and the pastels. And I don't really use them anymore. But at the time, it was a really, they're really helpful when you're learning because you get a really smooth surface. So we'll use that and we want white. To get white, if you just pull up a palette and then tap. So let me show you, hold on. If you pull up the palettes and this is what you get, go to the bottom, tap the square, and then tap in that top corner. Doesn't matter what the color is, doesn't matter what this color is. That top corner will always be white and that bottom corner is always black. So just get white. That's the easiest way of getting white. And then we're gonna I might just make the background, make this background a color. So let me show you what I did then. Sorry, I just did it without explaining what I was doing. I just tapped on background color. And you can make it any color, it doesn't matter. It's so we can see the white that we're painting. So I'll just make it red. And then I'm going to lock my drawing layer. So lock your drawing by swiping to the left and then make a layer underneath it. So I've still got some layers left. So if you need to make a new layer, just tap on that white, or tap on that plus, and you'll get a new layer. If the new layer, let me show you, if the new layer is above, in fact, I'll delete these and create a layer so that you can see exactly how it works. So if this is what you've got, tap on the plus. It gives you a new layer. I want the layer to be underneath, not on top of my drawing. So to move it underneath, you just hold it with your finger until it pops out of the space, which is, there we are, and then pull it down. So just hold and wait for it kind of pops, and then you can move it. And then on this layer, we're going to paint the face white. Oh, not with a brush that big. So I've put the opacity up because we want it to be solid white, but I've lowered the brush size a lot to, what size is this? To around and make it maybe about 2%. You can make it bigger than that, actually. Let's make it 4 or 5%. And then we're just going to colour in. So, in fact, we can make it bigger and colour quicker. And then we can just go around the edges. So try not to go near the edges because we'll tidy those up. So then I'm going to make it smaller, taking it down to about 3% just for doing the edges. Don't worry if you've gone over the edges, we can erase that. So the advantage of doing it like this is that once you've got a solid white space underneath the face, you can put whatever backgrounds you want and you can play around trying to put different ones in. You don't have to keep erasing where we're going to colour on the face. You have to erase because if you colour on top, it will often show through. Not always. Actually, with airbrushes, it might not, but I would recommend doing it this way. So now I'm just going to go around with the eraser wherever I have gone over the line. And then we can just start playing with backgrounds. So I think I said last week that you could do it this way, but I did it the other way. Last week I used an eraser and just erased the whole space from a single background. But if you're going to play around with different backgrounds, you need white underneath the face. So there we are. We've now got white. So I'm going to get rid of the background color now because we don't need it. We just needed it to see what we were doing there. So I'm just going to go back to white there. Done. I'm going to lock that white layer by swiping to the left and tapping lock. And then we're going to bring in some backgrounds. So there are lots of different ways that you can bring in backgrounds. The easiest way, certainly if you've done a white paint behind the face, the easiest way to do it is to go up here, click on add, and click on insert a photo, and then find a background and put it in. So if you've got the ones that we did last week, these are some of the ones that we made last week. In fact, I've got a whole album full of them. So here we are. These are the ones we did last week. So I can just say I want, what I usually try and do is look at a color in the background in the photo and try to have a similar color. So in this case, that's probably, I mean, it's greenish, but I quite like the blue one. So I'm going to go for the blue one. There we are. Okay, don't worry that it's covering your portrait. That's because it's in the wrong place. It's put it in here, and I'm just going to move it below. So if I tap on it and move it below, there we are. That's why we paint white, because then you put the background in and the white's above it, and you don't need to be erasing the background or selecting or doing anything. You can just put in a background and it'll sit there. So that's one way of doing a background. Another way of doing a background, if you've got one in Procreate, so say I've got this one in Procreate and you want to use that one, all you need to do is, so once you've go into your Procreate file, swipe down the screen with 3 fingers and this menu will appear and you're going to copy it. So just click copy and it's copied, and then we'll go out of this picture back into that one. And we're going to add a layer. So just press the plus, add a layer here, and then copy. So swipe down with 3 fingers, paste. Oh, it's a different background. It didn't pick the background. I thought I must have had a different background highlighted. Let me show you what I mean by that. In that in that file of backgrounds, if I open up the layer menu, these are all the different backgrounds we made last week. And although that's the one that's showing, I was obviously on a different one. Yes, I was. So I was on, this one is the one that's selected, but that's the background that's showing. So in order to copy the background that you want, I need to go up to that one, click that one, and make sure that one's highlighted. So now I can copy and paste and it will be that background. So copy, go back into here. I can just paste actually in this layer. Oh, I'm doing the 3 swipes. I didn't recognize them then. Sometimes you have to do them twice. There we are. And we have the different background and it's just pasted it in. I'm not going to use that one because it's too dark for this portrait. So I'm going to remove it. I'll remove that one. I like this one. But what I also wanted to show is how you can do one right now. So you don't have to go and bring in a background that you've already got. So I'm going to turn that one off. We'll add a layer, make sure the layer is underneath your white. And then you can just make a background of any kind. So I'm thinking, I mean, there's different ways of choosing colors. One is you can look, I usually look at the photo and look at what's in the background because I find that obviously that is the same kind of color that is reflected on her skin in the photo. If you make a bright pink background, then you would need to kind of add some pink reflected light on her photo. It's not really there on her portrait, sorry. It's not really there. So I usually just look at the background. So I quite like this creamy color here. But I want to do something a bit interesting. So I'm just going, so these are all in the materials. And maybe I'll go for that one, tawny. I don't know what it's going to do because I haven't used it before. And then I want a sort of creamy color. So if I don't have a creamy color in my palette, I go to the square and move this along slowly, looking at the colors until I can see a color that I kind of want. And there's one sort of around there. That's a bit too yellow actually, so I'm going to move it again. Keep going, there we are. That's kind of the color I want. So, and then I'm going to make the brush. Oh, no, I need to be in the right layer. I am in the right layer. So I need to make the brush very big. There we are. And I've just tapped on it 4 times and that's given me a background. You can't see it very well. It's a bit too pale. Let me do a darker one. Maybe I'll go for something a bit more browner and use a different brush on top of that one. And let's see what happens. Ah, this is quite small. So I'm going to undo and do it bigger. All right, it's a repeating pattern. So it all joins up, which I didn't really want. I'm not a big fan of repeating patterns that are too symmetrical. So I'm going to take that off. A reminder to take it off, the easiest thing to do is just keep tapping this button until you get to where you want. So I'm going to choose a different brush. Maybe I'll go to industrial. So my industrial ones are right underneath my materials. And yeah, I love the rusted decay brush, so we'll use that. That's better. That's the kind of background I wanted. And it's very easy. It's like 4 taps of the pencil. And you can also, once you've created a background, you can just go in here, tap on the N, and this menu appears. And then you can see what happens if you create different, sometimes it disappears. If you tap on different buttons here, you'll get different things. Mostly it's just disappeared, clearly because the colors are very light. Ah, but that one is really nice blue. Yeah, I mean, oh, I quite like the gray, actually. I might keep the gray. So it's gone gray and I like the gray, so I'm going to keep that. I can get rid of the blue underneath. The other way I wanted to show you of choosing colors, we've done this before. So you can create a palette. So you create a palette by tapping up here. And then I'm trying to, yeah, I need it on the palettes, that's why. I was trying to figure out why there was no plus. So if you then tap here to make sure you've got the palettes appearing, then go to the plus at the top. You can create a new palette, and you can create a new palette from just about anything. But we're going to create a new palette from this photo. So I'm just going to click new from photos and then tap the photo. And it will give you, it'll be right at the top. There it is. That's a palette from the image. Obviously, it doesn't include every color in that image because there are more hues in that image than you can fit in a palette. A palette is 30 colors, I think. But those are a lot of our main colors. So if we then choose one of the, so just tap on one of the skin tones, like maybe this one, and then you want to choose an appropriate color for the background. Once you've tapped on that, you can just go down here and click harmony, and it will give you, so at the moment I've got this set to analogous. I'm going to undo that. If you set it, tap complementary, it will give you the complementary color. So it gives you a blue, which would be a really nice color to use for your background because you know it's a complementary color. So it will go really well with her face. You can also, there are other options. You can choose split complementaries, which gives you, so that is more like the color I was going for initially, the kind of yellowy cream color that's come up automatically. You can also go for triadic and tetradic colors. So it gives you suitable colors that you can use that you know will go well with your skin tone. So I'm going to stick with the grey for now, and I might decide to go back to the creamy color later, but for now I'm just going to stick with the grey. So I'm going to lock it. That's not the one. This one. I'm going to lock it so I don't mess with it. So from now on, if I create layers, I want to create them between this layer and that layer, because that's the white that we did to block out the background. And this is the sketch. So I always color between the background and the sketch. If you've decided that this is definitely the background you want, then you could merge those two layers together if you wanted to. But for now, it makes sense to kind of keep them separate. So now we have a palette of her skin tones. Yeah, it's an interesting palette because I can't really see all her hair color in it. Although it implies her hair color is quite pink, actually. So we choose a color. I'm going to probably go for for this pink here. If I go back to that, it's easier for you to see, I think. And I'm going to use the airbrushes. We're going to use the airbrushes because when you're a beginner, they're really nice and smooth. Now, one thing I have done here is I've created two brushes of my own. I very rarely use the other brushes. There is a blend brush. We might use that. But I do use the soft brush and I do use the medium brush. I've made lighter versions of them. And I'll just show you how to do that so that you can do it if you want. And by lighter versions, I just mean that they're not so dark as soon as you use them. So they're just a bit lighter. It's easy to do. So you just make a duplicate of this brush. So to make a duplicate, you swipe it to the left. And in the middle there, it says duplicate. Never fiddle with the settings on your original brush. Always make a duplicate before you start playing with them. So, and it will just label it medium brush 1. So then if you tap on it, it'll open up the properties menu. If you do, by accident, which I did earlier today, fiddle with your original brush, which you didn't intend to, you can reset it. So you just go down here and it says reset brush. It's not going to let us reset this one because it's a copy of the original, but on the original, you can just go and reset brush. So if you do that, or you can, like, create new reset point just means that it will reset to what it is right now. But once you've amended it, you will get it will say reset brush and you can just reset it. But ideally, we don't have to do that because we don't play with our original brush. We play with other brushes. The only thing I've done here to make it lighter is I've gone into rendering there and it's set to intense glaze and I've set it to light glaze. So I've just changed and you see it automatically becomes paler. So I'll just show you that again. So that's intense glaze, that's light glaze. So I've just got a lighter version because if you're doing a face and you want to add, I don't know, pink cheeks and things, I find it works a lot better if you have a lighter version. So I just have a lighter version of it. I'm going to delete that because I've already got a light brush. So do the same with the soft brush. If you open it, you'll see this. I've opened the original brush and it gives me a reset. It says reset all settings. So if you mess with this, you can reset it. And again, with this one, I've just gone, this is my original. It is my original and I didn't reset it. I need to reset it. I was playing with these earlier. So I'm going to put this one back to intense glaze. So this is the original. The original has intense glaze, which that now has. The soft brush, where I messed around with it, is I simply went into rendering and made it light glaze. So it's much lighter. You can play around with these, just make some duplicates and try different things with these and you'll get some interesting effects. But all I've done is just made it lighter. So I'm probably going to use the soft brush. Doing a time check. We have plenty of time. So this was the skin tone. So I went for that skin tone there. So my first layer, I'm going to just draw her face. So although I'm using a soft brush, I will still never use a brush on full opacity, almost never. Just make it lighter. So this I've got on, well, let's put it up to 60, about 60%. So, and this brush responds to pressure. So if you start and it's really light like that, just press down harder. It responds to pressure, but it's very, very even. So if you're doing skin tone with it and you want really even skin tone, I know I tend to use the acrylic brushes, which are very streaky, like acrylic paint. But if you want a really smooth finish, this is the way to do it. So I'm going to go around now and just where I very carelessly went over the edges. I'm just going to get rid of that. So you can do it much slower and then you don't need to, if you don't go over the edges, you don't need to do this, but I always go over the edges. So I'm just going to remove all of that. I'm going to make it a bit smaller and just remove the colour from her eyes. It can stay everywhere else because we can go over it for eyebrows and mouth. But obviously we want her eyes to have some white to them. There we are. So now I'm going to set this layer there to multiply. So tap on the N and set to multiply. I don't think it makes that much difference actually with airbrushes, whether they're on multiply or not, but I would still always do it. So now we just want to build up the layers on her skin. So I'm going to add some, actually that's a very, maybe it's not, maybe it's okay. That's fine. I thought that was going to be too dark a pink, but it isn't. It looks really dark on my screen. It doesn't look dark at all on the big screen, but it looks quite dark, quite a dark skin color on mine. What I was going to do is create a clipping mask now. So tap on the button, make another layer just by tapping the plus, then tap on this layer and this menu appears. And what we're going to do is see what happens if we make a clipping mask. A clipping mask will basically only, because we've made it on top of the face color, it will only color on top of the face color. So in other words, it won't go over the hair, it won't go in the eyes. So it's a good way of adding color. I'm also going to set it to multiply, maybe, see what happens. Multiply. Oh, I meant to do that one on multiply and I didn't. So now we've got a clipping mask, we can start adding pink and you'll see that I can add pink. Why is that going over the edge when it's, oh, because I'm doing it on the wrong layer. That's why. On a clipping mask, it shouldn't go over the edge of her hair. So I knew I was drawing on the wrong layer because there we are. That's what a clipping mask does. So it basically will only go on top of where you've already painted. So you get nothing here. I've done that much too dark. So I'm going to very gently, it's too big as well, my brush. I'm going to very gently add color here. I'm going to look everywhere. I think I need some pink. So I'll put some on her lips. That's fine because we'll be putting more colour on them later. So there is some on her neck here. You can have some on her nose. That's a bit too much, so I'm going to take it back. Make this pencil a bit smaller. The advantage of doing it on a separate layer, so we're doing it on the clipping mask layer, is that we can then erase around the edges if we do. So like here, if around the nose I go off like that, I can just erase it because it's on a separate layer. If I'd drawn on the face layer, then I'd be erasing face color as well. But I'm not, I'm just erasing. I'm actually going to use an airbrush eraser as well. So I'm going to go to the airbrushes. So on erasers, just go to the airbrushes and choose. There is a way of tapping where you can tap and get the same brush, the same eraser as pencil, but because I don't usually use the same eraser, I tend not to use it. So I'm just erasing gently or on the nose where it's a bit, again, the color's a bit strong. So if you're using an eraser and you don't want to erase everything, just lower the opacity. So while it's on eraser, lower the opacity and then you can kind of erase gently. It'll just make that color a bit lighter rather than erasing all of it. If I keep going, it will eventually all disappear. But the same here, you get, it's kind of like smudging, but we're not smudging, we're erasing gently. And you get more of a kind of, what's the word, a gradient. That's the word I was looking for. You get more of a gradient when you do that. So I still need some more pink. She definitely needs pink over here. But it's quite nice with that brush, with that eraser brush, because you can then just erase as you need to. I need to make her face a bit bigger. I'll often find myself peering at a tiny, tiny little reference photo, wondering why I haven't just made it bigger so I can see what I'm doing. So I think we are still going to have some pink up there though. And there's pink around here. There is pink around the bottom of her face. A little bit there. A little bit under the nose. So, and then I'm going to use the, oh, maybe we'll try the smudge. Let's try airbrushing and smudge. So for smudge, I would probably use the same brush. So again, just a light soft brush. Oh yeah, that's nice. I used to find that I was really heavy-handed with airbrush smudging, and I didn't like the way it looked then. That's how I started using much more textured brushes. But actually, I've obviously got better at it over time because it doesn't look so unnatural now. So I'm going to switch now, and I want some yellow. So I can see lots of yellow on her face here, and the palette hasn't really given us a yellow. So I'm going to go and find one. Maybe if I harmony, will it give me a yellow? Probably if I do triadic. No, I'm trying to get a yellow. Give me a yellow. It's not going to give me a yellow at all. Nope. Ah, there we are. There's an analogous yellow. So let's see what that's like. I'm going to go to the square then. I always like to use the square. There's a circle as well. You can use the circle, but I find the square easier. I feel like I'm more in control of it. So I'm going to go a bit lighter. So I'm just going to go straight up to there and maybe come in a bit so it's a bit lighter and try with that. So I want to add some yellow. I'm going to do it on the clipping mask layer again. And I think I'm going to lower the opacity even more, but I'm going to make my brush a bit bigger because the areas that are yellow are quite large. So over here, got the whole of this. Oh, that works really nicely. It's just a little tint of yellow that you probably, I don't even know if you can see, but it is definitely adding a very nice tint of yellow there, which I like. Making her face look warmer just by adding it in. Now, if I was doing the whole portrait like this and I wasn't wasn't, what's the word, restricted by class time, I would carry on making lots and lots of layers of color like this. But I don't have enough time, so I'm not going to make lots of layers. But you can carry on. You don't have to finish it in class or while watching the video. You can go away and just play around with the layers. If you do them on separate layers, so I've just added a layer here. I'm going to use this for the shadow. But if you add all your colors on separate layers, then you can, if you decide you don't like them, you can just delete the layer and start again. So I'm going for a blue now. And again, I don't see a blue in that palette. There's nothing blue here. And I will always use a blue or a violet for shadows. So I'm going to go back to the harmony function. And that's giving me a kind of green blue. Maybe I'm going to go for there we are. That's what I wanted. So I've gone for the tetradic and it's given me a blue here, which is very violet looking. But then I'm going to tap on the square. I think that's probably too pale. So I'm just going to move it down a little bit to get it a bit more of a darker grey colour. So I'm going to use that for the shadows. I'm not sure if they're going to show through because the airbrush is such a solid colour, but so I'm going to just try and see, will that show through? Oh, it will, yeah. Sometimes the airbrush is so solid that if you draw something underneath, it won't show through, but of course we've got it set to multiply, haven't we? We have, so it's showing through. So I tend to draw shadows on underneath the face. So let me name these because I haven't named these. So it's tricky for you to know what's on each layer. That is my face tone. And that's my kind of highlights and shadows. No, that's my highlights and pinks. Highlights and pinks. That one, it's not going to let me because it's locked. So I need to unlock it. The top one is my sketch. Ideally, you should do this as you make every layer. I'm not very good at doing that. I always forget. But if you do it and remember to do it and then lock the layers as you move on to a new layer, you'll find it much easier to manage what you're doing. So that if you need to go back and correct things, you can. I'm going to make my brush smaller. I might switch. No, I'm not. I am on the soft brush one, the light one. I thought maybe I was on the light one. So I think that's probably a bit too much. So, but the good thing about the airbrush is you can kind of use, I'm using pressure and it's coming out darker, but you can, if you touch very lightly, it won't be as dark as the ones I'm doing. But I know I tend to do the shadows quite dark, and then I lower the opacity of the layer to get the shade that I want. I find that's just an easier way of working for me. So she's not going to have the black eyes that it currently looks like she's got. So there's a shadow there and there's a shadow there. I might put some in the hair too, so I can see where the darkest parts of the hair are. I'll definitely put some under here. It's not a very dark colour, so I will probably make it darker in a moment and you'll see why. See, I don't have a clipping mask on at the moment, so it's good. I have to erase the edges. She needs some on her lips. Again, when the shadow on the lips is usually more on the top lip than the bottom, and then usually on the edges of the bottom. There's a little bit on her chin there. There is a nice shadow coming down here. And then we have shade down here. There's some real greens over here as well. That's the problem with the creating a palette feature, is because the number of colors is limited, it doesn't give you all the hues that you can see in the picture. So now I've got my colors, my shadow colors. I'm just going to go to the smudge, and I've got it set to airbrush smudge. So I'm just going to work out those edges a little bit. You could use the eraser to do it. Actually, that's a bit too, my smudge is a bit too big, so I'm going to make it smaller. Again, I've only got the smudge on about sort of 50 something. I almost never use any brushes on full, except maybe sometimes when inking. If you're inking, you might want a full, quite a dark inker. So we're just blending. There are some blending brushes that come with the airbrush. I don't think I've ever used them, so I'm not sure how they work. I tend to just use 2 or 3 brushes for any drawing rather than lots of different ones. Because that's what you do if you were drawing, unless you're a real mixed media artist. You know, if you're doing something in watercolor, you're probably not going to add acrylic and oil. Maybe you would, but I'm not likely to. So I'm trying to be true to my own practice. So the other thing I want to do with this brush and the shadow is create a shadow on her eyes. Oh, I need my brush to be smaller. So I've got it about 2% there. So I'm just shaping the eye with some shadow. Now I would say when you're doing this bit, don't worry about how dark your color is. Think about, is it the right hue that you want? So is it the right shade of blue or purple that you want? Because you can make it lighter and you can make it darker, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So to make it lighter, if you open up the layer menu and click on the N, you can just lower the opacity. So if you've done it and you think, oh, that shadow is too dark, just, I'm going to show, if I move this over here, I move that over there, move this over here, you can, you'll see as I move it down. So you just trying to get it to open and it won't open up. Yeah, if you tap on the N, this menu should appear. And this is the opacity of the whole layer. So you can basically, if I move it down that far, the shadows have gone. And you can then just move it up until they look the way you think they should look. So I would say maybe somewhere around there. You can also make them darker. So say you've done them with a light color and you think they need to be a lot darker, then simply swipe the layer to the left and duplicate. So now it's twice as dark because we have 2 layers. You can merge the top layer down with the bottom. So it's then a lot darker, but then you can again open up the menu here and lower the opacity. So, and sometimes with hair, I was doing some hair this afternoon and I think I did about 6 layers because the hair just wasn't dark enough and I wanted to get it darker. And I did about 6 layers, merged them all together, and then I just reduced the opacity because then they were a little bit too dark. So you can do that. You can just mess around. And it might be that you make it lighter at this point, but then when you get to the end and you've done the hair and everything, you think, oh, it's too light, actually. I need to make it darker. You can do that. That's why we have the separate layers. So I'm going to name my layer. So I call that one shadows and lock it for now. And then we want another layer, which is going to go underneath the shadows layer, which is for the eyes. So I want it to be underneath the shadows layer because I drew these shadows and I want to see them. So if I drew the eyes on top, the eyes would get rid of those shadows, basically the eye color. I want them underneath because I want to keep the shadows. So, and her eyes are a kind of browny hazel. So a greeny brown, again, no color for that in the palette. So I'm going to find myself, I want a greeny brown though. Something a bit olivey, maybe something around there. I might have one in my palette. I have lots and lots of palettes. So usually I'll just go and look in my palettes. I think that's probably a great color. Whenever I see palettes, I've just recently done a weed and got rid of quite a lot of them. But often because you get them with brush sets. So if you buy brush sets, you will probably get palettes with them. So for doing the eyes, I'm going to stick with the same brush, but I'm going to keep it small it is quite small, and just come in. So I don't know if you can see there, but because I've done it underneath the shadow layer, the shadow is still here. That line is still there. I think it's going to need to be darker because I don't think it shows up well enough. So I will put black in the pupils later, but for now I'm just going to do that color. I might pick up a bit of brown as well, and just maybe very lightly add some brown to it across the top. Usually the bottom of the eyes is the lightest part, so I'm adding it. I still don't think they're dark enough. I need to add some brown. So do I have a brown there somewhere? Don't know. Is that going to be darker? Yeah, that's darker. All the detail in the eye I'll do later. I use color pencil brushes at the end to add some detail. That's fine for now. So I'm just going to find a black. So for a black, click on the square there, and then in the bottom corner, and you'll get a black. And then we'll just put that in there. In the middle, it takes quite a few layers to get a dark black. So you do 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, to get a dark black. Don't worry about staring eyes. We'll get rid of that when we add color pencil and highlights, and that will all disappear. So let's name that eyes and lock it. So then I'm going to go up to here and put a layer in above the face, and that's going to be for lips. So I'll name it first, or mouth, however you want to describe it. Let's say mouth. And then now I think we did have pinks in the palette, didn't we? Yeah. So I think I can't see her face right now because it's here. Yeah. Move it across, make it a bit smaller because it's taking up too much space. And yeah, so this palette, that's default. I think this pink in the bottom here is the one for her lips. So we'll have that. And then again with a small brush. Now you'll see that because we've got some shadow underneath, we can still see that shadow. It's still making parts of it darker. I don't think my shadow is dark enough. So I think I might make it darker towards the end. But you can see that the edges of her mouth are darker. So once I've done one layer, I'm going to add another layer because there's some areas that are pinker than others on her mouth. So I'm just going to make those areas pinker. And I'll use the smudge brush up here just to smudge them out a little bit so they look smoother. There we are. Then we can go on to the hair. So I'm doing this very quickly because I just want to get as much as I can done in the class time. You don't have to go this quickly, and you can add more and more layers, more than I'm doing. My screen is not letting me. There we are. It's done it now. My screen gets dirty, and then it's really hard to move things about on it. So, and I did clean it before class, but it's still not really cooperating. I think I'm probably going to go for this brown here for the darkest parts of her hair. So again, same brush. Oh, except I've got it I'm going to increase the opacity to around 50%. Again, I'm not going to worry about keeping within the lines. I find it much quicker to draw and then just erase. So I've drawn, and then I'll just come in. I might make my eraser full opacity though, and just erase around the edges. You might find it quicker the other way around. Some people find it much quicker to just draw carefully and not have to erase. I'm just not very good at that. I need to make it bigger. I'm doing it too small. Can't see what I'm doing. So we'll just go around the edges. I'm not being too careful because I tend to smudge the edges of the hair out anyway at the end. So I don't need to smudge too much right now. So I'm just going to smudge out the bottom a little bit, because then we're going to add a lighter colour. And then you'll add much lighter colours throughout the hair with a pencil. I just realised that this bit here should be dark. So let's make that much darker, going a bit more carefully. But not enough. My brush was still a bit big. Then I'm going to create another layer. I'm going to come back to the hair in just a moment, but while I've got this colour, I'm going to do the eyebrows in this colour because it's a darker colour. I'm doing them on a separate layer because, why is that not? Oh, because I didn't create it. Because we might want to, why is it not showing? Oh, because I'm on eraser. Didn't understand why I wasn't getting any colour then. If you do the eyebrows on a separate layer, you can make them darker or lighter independently of the hair. If you put them on the same layer as the hair, everything you do to the hair, you'll do to the eyebrows. And also sometimes where they overlap, where the eyebrows and the hair overlap at the edges, can look a bit weird if it's all done on the same layer. So I will usually always do them on a separate layer. So then I'm going to go back to the hair, and I don't like any of the colours in the palette, so I'm going to go back to the square and just tap on one of the colours. So I've just tapped on that brown, so it's given me that brown in a palette here. I actually want something more yellow though, so maybe I will move it along a little bit and then up. I don't know if that's going to work or not, but we'll try it and see. No, it's a bit green, isn't it? It's a bit too green. Let's make it more orangey. Yeah, that's better. If you do enough portraits, eventually, instinctively, you'll know where to go. But, oh, I didn't mean to do that bit. It just comes with practice. Again, I'm just going to go around my edges because they're a bit scruffy. Where's that line? Oh, it is. I think I need a new Apple pencil. My pencil's getting really erratic. And I bought a cheaper one to see if it was any good, and it really wasn't. So I do need another one, but I don't want to spend £140 on a new one. So I'm putting it off, but it does mean that my pencil is a bit erratic. So that's basically all the under colouring. And then what I would do, we're not going to have time to do all of it, but we've spent maybe 10 minutes just doing little bits of it. So I'm going to, no, I didn't mean to do that at all. Why have I lost my colour there? I meant to swipe it and lock it. Swipe it and lock it. And then usually I'll have a top layer, which needs to go above the eyebrows, where I'll use a colour pencil. So, or you could use a charcoal, or you could use, yeah, various things. I like the little pine, which is in the drawing. So it's the drawing section, and the top one is little pine. And that's what I'll use often for the drawing. And then I'm just going to go over all the features, basically. So it probably makes sense to start with the eyes. So I'm just going to colour pick from the eyes. So I've got the right colour. And then I'm going to go darker. So to colour pick, you just you tap here on this square, and you should get a circle appearing. Let me show you again. So if you tap on it, I've got a circle, and you can move that circle. So if it's not quite in the right place, you can move it to pick up the right colour, and then that colour will appear up here. So I want something darker, so I'm just going to go straight down and pick a dark brown from below. I'm not sure how big I've got this brush. No, it's okay. So I'm doing like an outline to the eyes. Most eyes have a darker colour around the side. Don't worry about if you're doing it really scruffily, because we're going to smudge a lot of this in. So, and then once I've done that, I'll kind of draw little lines going in. Same with the other one. And I'll use 2 or 3 different colours to do this. Actually, my pencil's a bit thin. I could use it a little bit thicker. Yeah, stronger lines there, that's better. So I'm constantly adjusting the opacity and the size of my brushes, just so that they do what I want them to do without too much work, really. I'm going to put something a little bit green in then. So I've got kind of a yellowy green, because I think she's got really nice hazel eyes. There's usually a lot of light at the bottom of someone's eyes, because the top tends to be in shadow from that eyelid. That's quite similar to the colour I've already got. Once I've done that, so I would probably work on that for quite a while, but I don't have time. So for now, I'm just going to show you how to do it. And then, no, that's too much of a smudge. And then I'll just use a very gentle smudge. So that you can't see the lines so clearly. It's more texture in the eyes. And then the other thing I'll do is pick up some white and make some nice white highlights. Then I'm going to go back to the color I used. So this is the color I used on the outside of her eyes. I'm going to use the same color up here on her eyebrows. And these actually look fine. Sometimes they don't look fine. And if they don't, then don't worry, just keep going. And another reason for I didn't do them on a separate layer. I was going to say you can gauche and blur them, but I've done them on the same layer as my eyes, haven't I? I have. Okay, that's not a problem. We can deal with that by selecting. What I want to do is to add some blur to the hairs in her eyebrows, and I'll add them to her eyelashes as well. So I have, without thinking, I've drawn both on the same layer. I've done the color in her eyes and the color in the eyebrows. So I'm going to move one of them into a different layer. So if you do this, you can just move something into a new layer. All you need to do is go over to the selection tool, tap it, and you want freehand. It usually comes up with uniform. So I always use it on freehand. So this is set to freehand. So set it to freehand. And then all you need to do is draw a big circle around her eyebrows, above her eyes, like that. So you join the dot, basically, just go around her eyebrows. The rest of it is all on different layers. So anything else doesn't matter. You just need to cover the lines that I've just drawn on her eyes. And then if you look at the bottom, it's actually, we don't want copy and paste, we want cut and paste. So I'm going to do the 3-finger menu instead. So you can 3-finger menu, just pull down with 3 fingers, the menu appears, and cut and paste. So now, if you go over and look here, there is a separate layer. That's the eyebrows and that's the eyes. So they're now in separate layers. So it's really easy to do. It takes a bit of practice to remember it. You have to do it a few times to remember it, but it's very easy to do. So don't worry at all if you draw something you didn't want to on a layer. So long as it's kind of physically separate, which here the eyebrows are, you can just draw around it. I could have done the eyes instead. Could have just drawn around those and put those on a separate layer, but you can just move it to a different layer. And then on that layer for her, I'm just checking I'm on the right layer. Yeah, so this is now the layer for her eyebrows. I'm going to do eyelashes as well. I'm going to go a bit darker. So I'm just going to go further down here to get a slightly darker color. And you'll see why I'm doing this in a moment. So I'm going to edge. This is why I love this little pine brush as well, because it's got a little bit of texture in it. And then we can just draw eyebrows. Not eyebrows, eyelashes. Oh, eyelashes. Same on the bottom. Add some down here. And then I move it down. Actually, I need a few more. I'm just realizing that there really aren't enough eyelashes here for this to work very well. Then you need to just go up here to the wand, tap the wand, and come down to Gaussian blur. So this is only going to blur what's on the layer that I've got highlighted. So it's just that bit. It'll just blur what's highlighted. So you tap on Gaussian blur, and then you move your pencil, put your pencil down on the screen and move it from left to right. And as you do, this number will go up as you're adding more blur to it. I do it very slowly, and I rarely use more than 2%. If you keep going, they just disappear. The lines disappear. So I did that just by keep drawing my pencil across, and now I'm trying to go back down to 2. There we are. So to blur, go that way. To undo the blur, go that way. And with a little bit of blur, the eyelashes look better. More human, more realistic. I'll probably add another layer of them, because I don't think they look right yet. But you can just keep adding layers and blurring it. And the hair, I'm going to do the hair. The hair I'll do on a different layer as well, probably using similar colors. So for the hair, I'm just going to add lots of strokes of hair color. So this will take a while. So I'm no way I'm going to finish this right now. But I'm really just following the shape of the hair. And around the edges here, I'll always have some that come down over the face. So you can just create the shape of the hair. So starting out with the darkest color and then going lighter. So you can take a long time doing this. So I did the darkest color, and then I've got the colors. This history is the most recent colors you've used. So you've got the colors there, or you've got them. You can just go up the square to get lighter colors in the same range. So just keep going. And then sometimes at the end, I will very lightly smudge them. So if I show you that, so I've just done the smudge brush. So I'll make it a bit bigger. So you can just very lightly smudge them. And obviously I'm going to have blonder colors down here. So I'll smudge them together a bit. Try to be light with the smudge, because if you're really heavy, you kind of lose a lot of the painting work that you've done, a lot of the drawing and painting. But if you use it lightly enough, you'll end up with a really nice portrait. So I'm pretty much out of time. So I will be working on this some more. When I sit back from it here and look at it on screen, I can see that her face is too pale. So I need to make it, it's much too pale. I need to make it darker. But I'll work on this this evening and tomorrow. And the hairline needs to be lower here. Sometimes just sitting back and looking at it on a screen is really helpful for me, because I can see the bits where it doesn't work. And that's kind of here on the hair. That hairline should be further down. Yeah. So, Deb, have a good week.